How do you fix a tuba? The answer is with a tuba glue. Tuba glue, tuba glue. Knocked out another one. Here we go. U.S. moves toward war. The concepts for today: explain the foreign policy actions of Japan leading up to World War II. What is the role of oil in Japan's actions leading up to World War II? And what effects did the attack on Pearl Harbor have on society's outlook on the war in Europe? We're talking about American society. And then also on the Japanese. And the only key vocab word for today is Hideki Tojo, who is the Prime Minister of Japan when World War II begins. Let's start talking about Japan today, but let's not talk about Japan in Pearl Harbor and World War II yet, but let's actually go back in time to the 1860s because that is when Japan first opens its doors to the Western culture and Western industry. And as it were, because they did this, they opened themselves up to the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s and early 1900s. And the main reason we need to mention this is because this is what allowed the Japanese to become a very militarized nation. And that is what we see by the time the 1840s roll around, 1830s. They're a very militarized government country. The second thing we should pay attention to is Japan's geography. And the important thing here is, while you all know that Japan is an island nation, it's more complicated than that for this country and natural resources. It's not a large nation, even though it is home to a lot of people. But the key here is that the nation itself is very mountainous. The land itself is very mountainous and does not have a lot of natural resources. Compared to the United States, the United States has a lot of different environments. It's a very large nation, and because of some of those factors, it has a lot of natural resources. The same can't be said for Japan and its geography. Because Japan's country lacks natural resources, the key one that it has trouble obtaining or obtaining a lot of is oil, which is becoming more and more popular as far as its use is concerned because the industrial nations are requiring more of it. And that's where Japanese imperialism comes into play. Because Japan has become a militarized nation and they are an industrialized nation, they do what many European powers were doing, and that is they begin to take over other nations that they believe they're more dominant than. And starting in 1931, we see a major move by Japan, and Japan goes into Manchuria, which is basically a part of China, and they take over that nation and they are looking for really one specific resource more than any other, and that is oil. Japan, as we mentioned, the country is not conducive to having a lot of natural resources, so if you need oil, you have to obtain it somehow. One way is trade, and Japan has traded with the United States for oil, but imperialism is certainly a more cost-effective way of getting it. And they will be an imperialistic nation for the next 10 years. And by 1941, they head into Indonesia and take over many islands in the South Pacific, Southeast Pacific Ocean. And it's at this time the United States really says, hold on, this isn't we're probably not going to deal with you and trade oil to you if this is how you're going to, if you're going to be an imperialistic nation. Um, it's at that time that Hideki Tojo, the Prime Minister of Japan, is going to begin preparing for the attack on Pearl Harbor. He continues negotiations with the United States, but it essentially becomes a front, and it's buying time for Japan to practice and plan for the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. At this time, Japan has proven itself the premier power in East and Southeast Asia, but the United States is that like looming presence in the Pacific Ocean that if it chooses to go up against Japan would pose a serious threat. So to protect all of its interests and the islands and nations that Japan had taken over and occupied by 1941, Japan believes that the best course of action, suggested by Hideki Tojo, is to try and take the United States out with a big punch, with a big secret attack on Pearl Harbor. And the goal of the attack is really to hit Pearl Harbor so hard that you knock the United States out, and in addition to that, you really drive fear into the United States about the Japanese army, the military, and really suggest that nobody should try and uh, attack the Japanese or fight against the Japanese, establish themselves as the premier power in the Pacific, not just not just East Asia or and Southeast Asia. However, it doesn't quite happen that way for Japan. The backlash that Pearl Harbor causes is not fear of the Japanese, but rather a rallying for what happened at Pearl Harbor and the willingness now to join World War II and to attack the enemy. One of those enemies is Japan after its attack on Pearl Harbor. That really is not a battle, it's really a slaughter. Japan does achieve full surprise, but unfortunately needed to finish the job in a different way. Had they considered occupying the island, maybe things would have been different, but that's a lot of speculation. A lot of things would have needed to have been done differently. With all that said, uh, I'm done here, and we'll see you next time.